His clients in the 2012 cycle included Jeff Flake of Arizona, who ran for Senate and won, Bob Corker in Tennessee, who ran for Senate and won, Pat McCrory's North Carolina gubernatorial race. He also won Congressman Steve King's re-election, and he won. And so in a difficult year for Republicans, he had a pretty darn good record. And I want to introduce you to Fred Davis, and he's going to talk to us about messaging. Thank you.
Mark is a really tall guy, or his mouth is located really high on his head. That's fine, except I can't see that man. Okay, well, hi. My job is winning. And so tonight I'm going to say some things that I would guess some of you might not agree with, and a lot of things that I think you will agree with. And I completely agree with what you said about the party here. Let's go back. Mark asked me, this started out, can you talk about your super PAC for Kevin James? Yes. Then we added just that little issue, what happened to Romney and the country in 2012. Then we added that little issue, what can we do about it in the future? So I'm going to try to do all that in a real short period of time, so we have plenty of time for questions and answers. There's this pendulum in politics. This is my 40th year in this crazy business. And it is unstoppable. And everybody thinks they can stop the fool thing, but it doesn't. I remember after McCain lost, my company did all the ads for McCain in 08. And I was already booked to give a talk here in Beverly Hills at the Four Seasons Hotel to kind of an actor-ish group. And I hadn't paid attention to who it was for until I walked in the room and I thought I'm going to be dead. And I'll be murdered before this is over. And Mark Halperin, who wrote Game Change, was the moderator, and there were 3 or 4 people. Of course, in California, it was all what I would call rather left of center Democrats, and me. And it went down the line. I was introduced last, and I got booed. And I got booed almost everything I said. It was a lovely speech to give. And I started because they thought the world would never change. Some guy named Barack Obama had stormed the world, had come out of being a community organizer, whatever, and he had taken over the country. And that this was going to forever change politics in the United States. Well, I sat there and I told them that wasn't the case. And they, of course, booed, and I couldn't get out of there. It was bad. And there's a good story about it in the paper if you ever read it. But my point was, go back a few years before that. 2 guys named Karl Rove and George W. Bush thought they'd done the exact same thing. They had built a Republican Party that was invincible for life. That pendulum had moved way over to the right. But then, what happened? Did it stay? The Iraq War, spending, some things that probably a lot of you and me didn't really agree with happened, and the pendulum started coming back. And so we nominated John McCain. 2004 came, the same, pendulum was still over here, looking pretty good. But anybody who follows politics, and all of you do or you wouldn't be here tonight, know that if you go through history, it's back and forth, it's back and forth. And so all of a sudden Barack Obama comes out of the woodwork and wins this election. Charming, outspoken, young, aggressive, all these things. But what did he have? He had the wind at his back because he had the economy. He had George W. Bush's economy, which because of the war and other things was pretty lousy. And it would have been very, very difficult for John McCain to win. People forget we were ahead from August through the convention until the day that the world economy collapsed. And then we ran out of tricks, and there wasn't a way to do it. So the pendulum swung the other way. What did the press say? It's permanent. This is never going to change. The world has changed. The world has gone from center right to center left or far left. America has their hands out. Nobody wants to work anymore. Free enterprise, that's down the drain. Then what happened? The midterm elections came. What happened then? Boy, that pendulum came back pretty quick, didn't it? It only took a couple of years, and the pendulum came back. This is all building a case for you, by the way. And the pendulum came back. So that's historically what happened. Now, why didn't Romney win? Is it because we don't have enough Hispanics in the party? I don't think so. Is it because we don't have enough African Americans in the party? Not this particular time. There was an African American candidate. We couldn't expect to get a huge percentage of those. But let's look at the other side of the coin. The economy was horrific. Obama had promised all these things, and none of them had come true. Any people in this room just dyed in the wool fanatics for Obamacare? Well, neither was the country. The country was against Obamacare. They thought it was a big stretch. They thought the spending was absurd. And so what happened? You had an opportunity to unseat this guy that will probably, well, obviously it won't happen again. He can't run again, thank heavens. Well, I know. That's exactly right. FDR comes back. What happened was that we, and I say this painfully, we didn't have the perfect candidate. And we all love Mitt, and we wish he won, but did he really connect with any of you? He didn't mean. I sat next to him at the head table of a speech a couple years ago in Washington, and he's as nice a guy as you can ever meet. My home's in Santa Barbara, and he asked me where I lived, and I said Santa Barbara, and he automatically had, 7 memorized things about Santa Barbara to talk about when you sit next to someone from Santa Barbara, and it was very strange. But he meant well, and he was as nice as he could be, but the 47% thing and all those just added up to an insurmountable problem with the candidate and problem with the campaign. And I've been in those campaigns for a long, long time, and they're miserable, and it's tough, and it's stressful, and things happen that when the race is over, you wish you'd done differently. But there are some things in that campaign, boy, I can't fathom how they didn't think they wouldn't have done them differently. For example, last summer, maybe responding to the fact that Mitt Romney was the Grinch that stole Christmas, that was out money grubbing every single person, and that there was something horrifically wrong with the free enterprise system. And how did they respond? They responded pretty, what'd you say? Weak, yeah, really weak. And the main thing I do is the strategy and the advertising. And I looked at not just the campaign's advertising, but the advertising for the super PACs. And what did I see? I don't know what you saw. I saw a bunch of ads. And a bunch of ads don't add up to winning. It requires something that Budweiser knows, and Chevy knows, and Ford knows, and Bank of America knows. It's ad campaigns. It's picking one thing you want people to remember in all of our case when they go in to vote, or when they sit at home and vote early. What do you want me to remember about Mitt Romney? What do you want me to remember about Mitt Romney or Barack Obama? One thing each. What is it?
Hope and change.
Yeah, well, Hope and Change is the best example because they did it right, we did it wrong. What was our slogan? I'm not saying we needed a better slogan. It's believe in America. Well, that's good if they backed it up with something, but it was kind of just words. The words didn't get anywhere. The ads did not lead you to one direction. They looked to me like they were trying desperately to answer something that came out that morning without thinking about the overall picture. The Obama campaign, there's a film coming out about a guy named Jim Margolis who did Obama's ads, and me, who did McCain's. And I saw a rough cut of it the other day, and I described it that in McCain headquarters, we felt like this, and I still think this is true. We always thought the Obama people probably got to work about 10 in the morning and had fillets for lunch, maybe a 2-martini lunch, and then worked an hour in the afternoon and went home. It was so perfectly calm and organized, and they had all the money in the world, while we were pirates scraping by for scraps, and bones, and we didn't have the money. And so, at the end of the day, my point on this, and how it relates to LA and Kevin James and your organization and what you might end up putting in your articles of incorporation or whatever it was, your mission statement later, is that in my world, and having done this for so long, there are 2 things that really, really matter in politics, as far as what I'm concerned with, winning. Your question was a really good one. A lot of these questions about, are you spinning your wheels? Is there hope for a Republican? Is Kevin James a sacrificial lamb? Those kind of things. I don't do those campaigns. I get paid to win. And so what we try to do in my company is find ways to win. And there's we won all of our Republican races. The only race we lost this year was Bill Bloomfield, and he wasn't running as a Republican. He ran as an independent, or declined to stay. And he could have won, I think, if he changed a few little things. But that's another story for another day. So the 2 things that matter are spectacular candidates and money. And it's sad that money is one of them. So let me tell you how I ran into Kevin James. I was giving a talk like this for a group called Generation Next, and I think it was in Culver City a few months ago. I'd never heard of Kevin James in my life. I do live here as well. I vote in LA, so I follow politics here a bit, but I've never been involved in it. And when you give a talk, and we'll do the Q&A in a minute, there's always 1 or 2 people that ask the really intelligent questions. And every now and then, there's somebody that asks a strange question. But you remember the ones that ask the hard ones, the smart ones. And this guy, sitting about where you were in, kept asking really good questions. And it was on C-SPAN, and so when that was over, when the TV part was over, I went over and introduced myself and said his name was Kevin James and he was running for mayor. And I honestly, sweetly kind of said, mayor of what? I had no clue. And he proceeded to tell me, and it was like 9 or 10 at night. It was in Culver City. I was tired. I wanted to go home. But he was interesting enough that I sat there for 2 hours and listened to his pitch. And here's what I heard. I heard what I still think is a shockingly great candidate in a sleeper race. And a bunch of stars that just might be aligned. No Hispanic got into the race. None of the big dollar kind of typical Republicans got in the race. And you might think, ooh, that's bad, Rick Caruso could have won. Rick Caruso could have self-funded, but he would have been a lot harder to get into the office than Kevin James would be. The fact that Kevin's gay. I didn't even know he was gay that night. I found out a couple days later, somebody said, well, he's gay. Oh, no, he's not. He is. I didn't know it, and I thought that was the best news I've ever heard. Yeah, it gets rid of that little social problem that some of us in the Republican Party, are looked down upon for. And it made him more acceptable to the rest of the voters here in LA. And also, what else did it do? It made him kind of a novelty nationwide and statewide. We don't have a standard bearer for the Republican Party in California. I know this is news to all of us. They have Jerry Brown. We have nobody. And a mayor of Los Angeles does have the sufficient bully pulpit to be able to do something about that. And any of you who know Kevin know that he is not a shy, retiring flower. I mean, he is a bulldog, but he's a knowledgeable bulldog. And I learned that night. So here you have this guy that might actually appeal for one odd reason, because he happens to be gay, to some Democrats and some moderates. There's no Hispanic entered, no huge money people entered the race, and you have 3 Democrats, well, forget the other people, but you have 3 Democrats that kind of divide up that union vote. And we all know the unions are really hard to beat. And yes, this union's going here and this union's going there, and that, I wish them well. I hope they all divide up the vote as best they can. And yet, what do we have? We have a city that you guys and gals know, but I don't think the city knows very well, is on the brink of our own fiscal cliff. You know it, but think of your friends who aren't in groups like this. I bet you they don't really know that, or don't really buy it. I will secretly tell you, we're in the middle of doing a poll right now, and that's one of the questions that I added to it. And the pollster said, well, people, of course they have to know they're falling off a fiscal cliff. I don't think so. And, here's what they know. They know that when they drive down the street, I live up kind of under the wood on the Hollywood sign, so I have to come down Beechwood Canyon. I need a M1 tank to get down that street. I have a little car. I disappear down into holes and come back out on the other side. I'm always afraid my wheels are going to get bent, literally. Here's another true story. We have a burglar alarm at the office, and it went off, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago. Any guess on when the police showed up? 6 hours later. No phone call to see if I happen to be dead. No, 6 hours. And we all know, but they don't know why that happened and where that city money's gone. I saw a deal today. I got an email from somebody, and I haven't gotten to watch the video yet, but the Gil Garcetti said something the other day about we're not taxed nearly enough, that the city doesn't have nearly enough money. Well, good Lord, I think there's a lot of union members and there's a lot of moderate people out there that might actually say enough is enough and get behind Kevin James. So nationally, what do we need? We need great candidates and great campaigns. I hate to say this, we didn't have either in 2012. Does that mean that the Republican brand is dead? Does that mean that our efforts should go into only recruiting Hispanics and all the gnashing of teeth that's going on right now? I don't think so. Because ideologically, if you look at the exit polls, which I unfortunately have to do every day of my life, it's the 40% moderate, 30% conservative, 20% liberal has not changed. America is still a center-right country. And if you have people that disagree with you on that, go back to those numbers. Show them those numbers. That hasn't changed in 2 decades. So is all of a sudden, because one guy lost, our party needing to do desperate things? No. We need to just go back to the basics and do them right. We need to, you should run for office. I was sitting back there thinking that, Mark. It's people like that can communicate, that can tear at your heartstrings. Why do you think a community organizer did well communicating with people while the head of a giant takeover firm did not? That's a little flaw. That's an innate flaw. That is not a flaw with our party. That's a flaw with a certain candidate. Remember my little speech at Generation Next. And I meet this guy and he's fascinating, but he has $0. He raised $250,000, but he had like $1.50 and a cup of coffee in the bank. and $1,300, isn't that the max donation? I think $1,300. There was no way. This was maybe in October. There were not enough days. There were not enough people. And he didn't have the organization to get to the $3 or $4 million that, in particular, Garcetti and Wendy Gruhl would have. Didn't add up. So I had run a campaign for president this last cycle for a guy named John Huntsman, and he didn't have money, and he turned out to be a little different than we thought. And so, was that nicely worded? I remember the camera. And so the decision was made similar decision that I would leave the campaign in July and start a super PAC. And the whole reason for super PACs is to raise larger sums of money in a shorter period of time. And so I sat there and listening to Kevin, I thought, right guy, remember, two things were needed. Great candidate, money, and not a little money, a lot of evil money. So I thought this was a great candidate. He was not going to get there, so I recommended to him that night, while I still legally could, because once you start a super PAC, I can't talk to him. I recommended a rather dramatic shakeup in his campaign. And if you followed it, that has happened. He brought in a guy named John Weaver, who is a genius political strategist from Austin, Texas, who was John McCain's chief strategist for many, many years, who hired me originally to do the McCain campaign. And he is now, you'll see the fruits of that starting in January. But what's the next piece? The next piece was money. And I'm not here fundraising tonight, by the way, so keep your wallet in your pocket. But I thought to myself, this guy does not have a chance against the unions without the similar resources, maybe even higher resources than they will have. They have boots on the ground in the forms of police, fire, nurses, teachers. What's Kevin going to have? He's going to have you guys and a bunch of money so that I can be on the air doing what I do best to the same level that they are able. So you can't win without both. You have to have boots on the ground. You have to have money. We've solved the organizational problem. He's already a good candidate. My organization, the Super PAC called Better Way LA, is well underway to having that kind of money that is necessary to do this. But the grassroots piece is up to you guys, and that's why I'm here tonight.
But the votes in the end are 2/3 liberal in this city.
Yeah, but you know how many people vote for mayor?
Right.
Yeah.
Hardly anybody. And you know why? And you know why that means we can win? Back to you guys. If this was an 80% turnout, you're totally right. We should all go home. Go on in and have food and drinks and split. But just a handful of people vote. And all we have to do is get our handful of people out there. There's a guy named Jeff Corliss that's the new campaign manager. Some of you know him. He's been involved in politics for a long time. And he's doing a great job getting that organized. So I do hope you all get very involved.